private school in New York is trying to grapple with the issue of race relations, and they're doing so in a very controversial way. I have the details, and now you get to decide whether or not it really is controversial. Now, this is Fieldston Lower School in New York City. Again, it is a private school, and what they're planning on doing is separating their classrooms based on race once a week in order to have discussions about race relations. Now, just to give you some more information, parents get a form asking them to answer for their elementary school age kids. What is your race? The choices are African American, Black, Asian, Pacific Islander, Latina, Latino, multiracial, white, and not sure. With this information, the kids, starting in 3rd grade, are split up into racial affinity groups and encouraged to have frank conversations about their identities and experiences, and then reunite for a curriculum designed to foster interracial empathy by encouraging children to recognize differences without disrespect while teaching kids strategies and the language for navigating racial conflict. All right, so you kind of delve deeper into why they're doing this, because the headlines say segregation, and it sounds really bad, but once you look into the details, maybe this could be a credible way of dealing with race relations from a young age. What do you guys think?
I think so. I think it could definitely be, they're onto something. The only issue I have is that I don't think that 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders have the maturity to be able to have this conversation and to learn it and then apply it in their lives. If this was a private school for high school students, I think this would be great, because that's the place where you're now going into the world. You need to learn this. You can understand those conversations. You've also started to experience certain things due to your race, due to your sex, and so you can start to apply those situations and say, this is what happened, and then have someone facilitate that. But a 3rd grader, a 4th grader, and 5th grader, I don't think they're gonna truly learn. And then whatever happens there, they're just gonna go home and they're gonna get whatever bullshit their parents are saying, and that's just gonna take over whatever they learned.
I actually disagree. I actually think that it's good to stimulate these conversations before their views of race have hardened and become dogmatic by experience. And specifically the school, I read the New York Magazine article by Lisa Miller, which was fascinating, which is a more in-depth look at it. But the school specifically said that at 8-year-olds, and that's I think starting with 3rd grade, they have kind of a vague sense of racial identity. So you're right, they are just forming those. And the idea is to really push them to have uncomfortable conversations that, interestingly enough, in progressive liberal schools, because of color blindness and political correctness, they're not having. Everyone is dancing around the issue. I really feel like we have to take off our rose-colored glasses about race in this country and look at the full, complicated prism of like colors and situations that make up like the racial landscape here, and then take in like the harsh reality of what's happening, and that's the only way we have a brighter future.
Yeah, I think it's important to definitely reach children when their ideology is malleable. And when you get older, I think that with mass media and the stereotypes constantly being thrown at you, you're more likely to believe in certain things that are difficult to change. But I mean, I think about my own experiences, right? And this is, I know I was really young, but this is an embarrassing story to share, but I think it actually kind of gives you an example of why I think this is a good idea. The first time I ever thought about race was when I was in kindergarten. And that was the first time I had ever met a Black girl, right? So I grew up in an Armenian household. My community is predominantly Latino, and I just had never seen a Black girl or Black person before. And I remember in kindergarten, just kind of like staring at her and wondering like, what's going on? My parents had never said anything about Black people. And so I like started talking to her, and I hurt her feelings because I asked her about her hair. And so I noticed these differences. I'm literally a 5-year-old kid. I'm trying to understand, like, why are we different? What's going on? Is this normal? Is it, so those conversations need to be had at a young age so kids know what to expect. Kids know what the differences are. Kids understand that, hey, just because we might be different in the way we look, doesn't mean that we're different as people. And so I like the fact that they're trying to do this. I just wish that the media's coverage was a little more detailed about it, because I don't like the headlines that focus solely on the segregation component of it. Of course,
yeah. No, I'm totally with you, because I remember those experiences as a young Black guy growing up in Texas in an all-white school and having those same experiences and issues. But what if we're going to then, because I agree with this happening, it's just that age group. But see, what happens then is I know the parents now, even with my kids. And my children and their friends can learn something in school, and if the parents have a different ideology than what they're learning, they go home and they absorb and they take in what their parents are saying. It happens to all of us.
Yeah.
So say, for instance, you went home and you would have said, hey, I've never seen this black girl, and if your parents would have had any type of racism in them, they might have said something to you that would have taken away whatever love and support or whatever you've gotten from the teacher or whatever conversation. So if we're gonna do it at this age, I think that it should be mandatory that the parents should be there as well. So
That's
that way the
interesting.
parents can learn,
Okay.
and that way everyone's being supported, everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
Because I just get nervous of if dad's racist, by some degree, and you come home and you're like, we have this conversation, and he says, oh, Latinos are stupid, or Asians are this, or blacks are that, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, I guess dad is right.
Yeah.
Well, but in this is kind of a control group. This school is very progressive, private
Yes.
school, and in fact, the real critics are people who are so liberal that they have a problem with the segregation aspect
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah, of course.
So I mean, I can see how if you took this model and broadened it and put it in a public school with a much different dynamic, then you could certainly run into those problems. But some of the quotes from Lisa's article that stood out to me is she said researchers suggest that a lot of authentic conversations about race have been inhibited by liberal values for decades, and that the cumulative result is that we have these unspoken constraints create a nation of fellow citizens who are foreigners to each other. We do not speak to each other about our real authentic experiences, and we become mute xenophobes whose hearts rush to their throats when a racially charged comment or conflict or even curiosity arises. And the idea being, if we and even just the fact that white people don't even recognize their own whiteness and their own white privilege, and our race is invisible because we are. We're the mainstream.
I did love when she said that white people have a stake in the conversation.
Yes.
That was really great. I was like, about time.
Right, because we need to understand what otherness feels like. And I remember taking anthropology classes in college, and finally that switch flipped where I was like, oh, my life is a construct just like anybody else's, but I don't see it because my world is, I'm blind to it, really.
Yeah.
So I think anytime anyone's trying something creative, progressive, different in the conversation around race, I applaud it.
Oh, of course.
It could fall on its face, and for sure it's already super controversial. Like this, she talks about some of these PTA meetings where parents are there was some really interesting conversations around parents who are Jewish but they don't feel like they're white, and then there were black parents that were like, whoa, you are white, don't get it twisted.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Like those conversations are hard and uncomfortable and need to happen.
Yes.
So I'm excited that it is.
That plays into what I was just saying here. Of now you have these parents who have a different ideology, and now you are teaching these kids. But if the parents are on the same accord, it doesn't go anywhere.
Never underestimate the power of education, though, because there are certain values that I grew up with that I rejected because of education. Like, I'm an atheist because of my education. I was, told over and over again, like, you need to marry an Armenian guy, this and that. I rejected that as well because of my experiences. So I think experiences also play a huge role. And remember, never underestimate how rebellious kids can be.